Hello, my name is Anthony Effinger, and I'm talking with Emily Suvada, Portland-based author of the award-winning Mortal Coil trilogy of novels. As you'll find out, she knows something about pandemics. Thanks for being with us, Emily.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So your novels are eerily prescient. Mortal Coil tells the story of a young woman dealing with a pandemic that makes COVID-19 seem like the chickenpox. What does our situation look like to someone who has imagined the worst?
So in Mortal Coil, there's a virus that infects people and then makes them explode into giant plumes of infectious mist. So it's hyper airborne. And there's no vaccine, there's no cure. So to escape it, people have moved into underground, tightly controlled bunkers, airlocked bunkers, sort of like a massive quarantine effort. And I think looking around and experiencing this and living through it, what I think I'm seeing most of all is that we have a lot that we need to do ongoing to prepare for a virus that is worse than this. This is a terrible virus. This is killing a lot of people. But there are a lot of big threats out there. There's threats like Ebola, for instance. And it's hard to look around at the transmission rates that we've been seeing and say that we'd be prepared for something like Ebola right now.
Nobody's exploding yet, but
Yeah.
wait a couple months and that might start to happen.
Fingers crossed it does not.
Before you started publishing books, you got a degree in advanced math from the University of Sydney, you're from Australia, and then worked as a quantitative analyst. Was it at a bank?
Yeah. So basically, my degree was math and then theoretical astrophysics. And then I took that into finance, where I used math and physics to basically try to predict the stock market. So a lot of data modeling, actually. So data analysis and data modeling, which has kept me glued to all of the modeling that's happening right now, which is one of the big drivers of our response to this virus.
So how are you spending your days?
Looking after my baby. I have an 11-month-old, and he's very much wanting to get out of the house and play with other babies. So we're getting to the park. We live near a park. We're getting to the park a few times a day and just letting him just crawl around in the grass, letting him get outside, going for long walks. Not a lot of time to get writing done when you're cooped up in a house with a baby, unfortunately.
What have you learned about yourself in this quarantine?
I've learned that I am really into data analysis. I knew I was into data analysis from my math and physics background and from my finance background, but I haven't been doing very much of it for the last few years. And during this crisis, I've been going into GitHub repositories of data. I've been building my own models. I've got crazy spreadsheets. I've really learned that I have a really data-driven mind.
Given your research, where do you think we are in a year?
I think we might be in a really good place in a year in terms of discoveries of therapeutics and progress towards a vaccine. I think the timeline of 18 months for a vaccine is probably quite reasonable, but I think we could potentially see some acceleration given some trials are starting now and given the amount of potentially unlimited resources that the world might be willing to throw into something like this. So that makes me really hopeful.
Do you see us going back to life as it was completely?
I don't think I do. I mean, I think mostly I can see life going back to the way that it was, but this outbreak raises a lot of questions. If doing things like touching one another and not being aware of unclean surfaces, sneezing in public, going to work while sick, shaking hands, these things can not only spread viruses like this, but they can spread the flu. And we lose a lot of people globally to the flu, over 500,000 people.
Politically, you see what happened, you're seeing what is happening in Hungary with Viktor Orban consolidating power. And you see what is happening here in the US. What happens in November, do you think?
Wow,
you're a science fiction writer, so here we
question. No, look, Honestly, things are so much in flux. You know, I'm reading about the National Guard blocking traffic from New York and Rhode Island right now. I'm reading about some really, really situations that if you told me about a few months ago, I would never have believed. Not to mention the stories of, you know, people in the UK overwhelming the police with calls on their neighbors going for 2 walks a day. Um, I, I understand that we have a shared social responsibility, and I understand that suppressing and containing this virus is really important. Um, and I think we do need to really focus on that. But I think afterwards, there's gonna have been situations like in Hungary where we can ask, when this happens again, and if this happens to some with a virus that is extremely deadly, how can we share the social responsibility of protecting each other and going into quarantine without letting state powers increase their control in a way that they may not want to give back?
So what's the first thing you're going to do when this is over?
Oh, I think I'm gonna take my baby to a restaurant and put him in the high chair and then eat a meal where he throws food everywhere and go, why did we go why did we go to a restaurant again? But I just really want that experience.
One last question about the book. There's an entity in it called Cartaxis, which is a giant
Yes.
evil corporation that sells gene editing mechanisms,
Hmm.
technology. Was there an inspiration for them in the real world?
Honestly, I feel like Cartaxis is probably the most prescient thing in the book. I just don't think we've seen it yet. You know, what we have right now in terms of our governments and our corporations is a distributed network. And right now we're seeing the vulnerability of a distributed network during a central threat, a threat that affects everything. And I think coming out of this, there may be some questions about organizations that can be a centralized network. I don't know what they'll be. I don't know if they'll be public or private. And I think that as a society, we're going to have to really try and engage with the conversations about what centralized global networks and power structures might look like. Because when there are these global threats like pandemics, distributed networks are highly vulnerable.
When you
So
say distributed network, you mean a system of nations that,
exactly. And
and
then within, it's sort of fractal. So you've got this system of nations connected through air travel and trade and people. And then within a nation, you've got your states, your counties, and then within that, you have your healthcare providers, your hospitals, your neighborhoods, your homes, your people. Um, and there's a very, very low ability to really coordinate a response. Although, as an unflagging optimist, I believe that if we were faced with an Ebola, we've seen countries rally and band together, and we have seen the country rally and band together in a very strong way here. I think faced with an existential threat, we could see people really, really rise to the occasion, rally, band together, and make things work.
but that's not the answer to our problem. Is a giant evil corporation? It's a giant benevolent centralized. Is that what we're?
You know, I don't use the word evil. My books exist in a morally gray landscape, which I believe is the landscape that we live in.
Hmm.
Um, I don't like to write true villains because I believe that everybody is the hero of their own story, including the evil people in my books. They all think they're doing the right thing for the right reasons, and they all think they're doing it better than anybody else. And it's when those versions of the right thing for the right reasons, or sometimes the wrong thing for the right reasons, clash with other people's freedoms, other people's needs, other people's lives. That's when we start throwing around good and evil. I often get asked by readers in my book. They're like, "Is Cartaxis good or bad?" You know, and I'm like, that question is the point of the book.
I really appreciate that, and I think we might have to check in with you again as this goes along. I thank you
Sure.
so much for doing this.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.